Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Hello. Hello.
This is My Life DIY, and
Hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Ash.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light,
And you're now listening
to Dark Wolf's Den.
to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
Are ghosts real?
We
had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation, don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live worldwide from a secret mountain cave hidden high up in the beautifully snow-covered peaks of the Idaho mountains. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be discussing part 2 of the series we started the end of last week called Musicians and UFOs. When I first started this, I did not expect this to be a 2-part or probably going to end up being a 3-part series altogether. But is this not just an absolutely fascinating topic, right? I just can't get enough of this myself, and I know you guys seem to be enjoying it too. So we're going to be discussing Musicians and UFOs tonight, Wednesday, March 24th, 2021, on the Dark Wolf's Den Show. But first, today in history. And as we're talking about musicians again tonight, I found another amazing today in history that relates right with it. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, on this day in 1941, Glenn Miller begins work on his first movie for 20th Century Fox. And from everything I can find, it looks to be a movie called Sun Valley Serenade, which is actually really interesting to me because I've got a really, really close tie to Sun Valley. So really neat fact of the day today. Not only am I connected to it, but it connects directly to our topic of musicians and UFOs. And that is today's Today in History. And for those that don't know, there actually is a mystery that surrounds Mr. Glenn Miller. You see, he disappeared and vanished into thin air over the English Channel. Nobody knows what happened to Glenn Miller, so that's another one of those interesting mysteries. We might have to dig that case file out one night, right? That'd be interesting. But speaking of case files, last week we covered a multitude of case files of musicians that have had dealings with UFOs one way or the other, whether they be a contactee or whether they are just very interested and have seen a multitude of UFOs. Everybody from David Bowie to Dolly Parton and many in between were discussed last week. John Denver, another one we brought up last week. So if you haven't heard part 1 of this series, definitely go back to last Thursday's episode, March the... hold on a minute. What day was that, actually? Let me pull my calendar up here. March the 18th. Go back to March the 18th, guys. I am so sorry it took me a minute to find that date. Go back to March the 18th and check that episode out. That is the first episode in the series we're doing tonight, Musicians and UFOs. And like I said, we covered Bowie and Parton, Dolly Parton, and as well as John Denver and quite a few others. And we're going to pick right back up where we left off last week, again with Mr. Grant Cameron and yet another musician who has been influenced by UFOs.
Bono is one that really surprised me. Bono, of course, as you know, is a big religious guy. And here's his tour. He does the 360 tour.
Bono, of course, being the lead singer of the band U2.
He's in Salt Lake City, and of course, over top of the stadium, they have the UFO sighting, and this happens all the time.
I like the way he said that, all the time. But what do you mean all the time? Like, how many artists have had UFO sightings over the Salt Lake City stadium?
There's Ozzy, there's the concert for Obama, there was one, Bruce Springsteen, and all these UFOs flying over top of the stadium.
I mean, come on, let's be honest. If you're in a UFO, and you enjoyed human rock music, which these aliens seem to do, for whatever reason, would you not like fly over where the concert's at, where you could just tune it in on the big screen, wouldn't even have to pay for a ticket? You and your whole UFO crew can just sit there and jam out to the rock music, right? While you're working in the UFO, or while you're observing, right? Watching the fan base. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they're watching their fans, right? Or maybe they're watching the show. But wouldn't you? I mean, if I had a UFO, I got to say, that's brilliant. I kind of don't think I would pass on the opportunity to do that. With that said, let's get back to the story of Bono in Salt Lake City.
And during his concert, this is the only sort of alien connection, but it's really weird alien connection. He's got his stage, and he calls it his spaceship. How do you like my spaceship? And then during the concert, this alien starts to go around this round thing on top, and the alien is saying, "What time is it? What time is it? What time is it?"
Which on the surface, it looks like it could just be like a little eye catcher, right? Little entertainment piece. Because, you know, entertainers are always doing things that are kind of out there just to get people's attention, right? But what time is it? What time is it? That actually has a significance. Check this out.
And if you're an abductee, you know what time it is.
Now, I am not an abductee to the best of my knowledge. Let me caveat that with to the best of my knowledge, right? I don't have any missing time. I don't have any experiences that I could say I would know was, you know, an abduction experience by any means. Now, with that said, you're going to find this really interesting, guys, especially those of us in the Mandela Effect community might find this very intriguing because it has to do with a number sync. And I know the Mandela Effect people are really into number syncs, but I know a lot of you guys are into number synchronicities, right? Well, this is a number synchronicity you guys might be familiar with.
333.
And of course, that is a very popular number synchronicity among people.
And it goes 333, 333. And then Bono says, "End of the world. We need help."
Now, that's an interesting series of events. You've got this thing on top, I guess, spinning around, I'm assuming, with the alien saying, "What time is it? What time is it? What time is it?" Then the 333 comes up, and then Bono says, "End of the world, we need help." So this is actually interpreted by two different groups in two different ways.
Now, Bono, the way interpreted by the religious Bono people is it's Jeremiah 33:3. "Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee."
And I guess that would make sense. That's a fair perspective. I don't understand what the alien saying "what time is it" has to do with Jeremiah in the Bible, but all right, fair enough. Once again, this is an entertainment thing, like I said a moment ago, so I guess the argument can be made. It's just to catch people's eye. But
if you look at it from the other perspective, it's like, wow, this alien is saying, "What time is it? What time is it?" And all of a sudden, 333, 333, and this thing is going around the screen. He has aliens. This is on his screen. He has these aliens flying around on his screen.
So what do you guys think of that particular case file with Bono? Do you think he was just trying to be religious and just get people's attention with the aliens? Or do you think he may have been giving a little message to people, right? A wink, wink, nod, nod, hint, hint, right? You never know. I mean, look at the evidence we've garnered so far. And with this episode, we've only just begun.
Robbie Williams is clearly an abductee. I won't do too much with him. He's sold 50 million. You got to remember, a lot of these people sold 50 million, 100 million, 300 million albums. These are big musicians. He said, "I've been visited by aliens, 50 million albums."
And it makes you wonder the messages that are being purposely put into these, whether the artist even is aware of it or not. Although we heard in the first part of this series that many of the artists are very much aware. Others are very much in a altered state of consciousness, to put it nicely, stoned, as the one put it. But in all seriousness, it really goes back to the idea that there could be alien messages being put in this music, and it's usually good messages. Don't get me wrong. It's usually save the environment, save the earth, take care of the planet, things of that nature. It's not necessarily malevolent messages. Thank goodness it's more benevolent messages, but just the same, it makes you wonder what messages are ending up in this music that is selling 50 and 100,000 copies at a time, and what we are being exposed to subconsciously that are actually alien messages to humans.
John Anderson is one of the best. I love John Anderson. He's the guy that said all music and art comes from the Pleiades.
And to be clear here, we are talking about John Anderson, the former vocalist for the band Yes, and not John Anderson, the country singer, because that was actually my first thought, and upon further research, I found that it was John Anderson, the lead singer for the band Yes. So just so we know who we're talking about here.
And we actually got a chance where I was in on an interview where they were asking questions, and I asked them this, and they didn't really ask him, where did you get this from? Where did this idea come from? But John Anderson says to me, there's no question. I remember Chris Squire, the bassist, and I talking about these things and looking at photographs of spaceships.
So not only himself, but his bandmates, also musicians, of course, were also very much into the UFO theme. So it's not always the lead singers. It's sometimes the bassists, sometimes the drummers, just the fact of being a musician, having that type of open mindset, that openness to the creative messages that are coming through. It really speaks to the idea, once again, of musicians all being just absolutely fascinated with this UFO topic for some reason.
The Magical is his main song that talks about UFO stuff. And it was written spontaneously. A lot of these songs were written like that, instantaneously.
And again, it makes you wonder where the message is coming from. Now, it could just be the inspiration. It very well could, because I have had inspiration like that myself that had to get itself out onto paper or to release itself into the world. I'm not the most artistic on some levels. I am on others, like writing. And I've had a couple ideas come to me that just would not leave me alone, and I felt that I had to put them on paper. So I totally get inspiration, but it really does make you wonder, especially when so many of these UFO-themed songs come out that have this quick writing to them, just this instant, it wrote itself like that, It really speaks to the idea that it could be people, and these are, once again, people who have had UFO experiences. These aren't just people who are, randos, if you will. These are artists who are into UFOs, have UFO experiences, and suddenly get these downloaded information, if you will, these songs that instantly come into reality that they just have to write down, and within moments they've got the whole song written. And I can't count the times I've heard artists say that, right? How about you guys? That they've said that the song just pretty much wrote itself, right?
They were like downloads. They just came, and some musicians actually said, if it takes you more than 5 minutes to write a song, it's not very good. It has to come like right away.
And I'll give you guys a little spoiler alert. If you're interested in the idea of the downloads and artists and musicians and UFOs and the whole connection between those three, just wait till part 3 of this series tomorrow night, and we're going to be covering that very much more specifically. We're just going to kind of touch on that this evening. But tomorrow we're going to dig deep into the downloads part of this conversation.
But if you hear the conversation that was going on at the big outside theater last night, and you see the number of people who were there, you can see that we're starting to move, that this idea is coming across. And one of the things that Linda and all these other people were talking about is this idea of fear and love, that you've got to move from fear to love. and that if you don't have love, you have fear, and the fear is dominating the world.
And that is so unfortunately true, but it makes a very good point. You have two choices, fear and love, and that is one thing in all of the paranormal communities. I think we all agree upon that fact, that love is one of the most important messages that we can put out there as paranormal researchers, whether it be manifestation or whether it be, aliens, ghosts, whatever the case may be. If there's one thing we've learned in humankind, it's that love is stronger than fear, and love wins the day a lot more than fear does. So I have to agree with them. What a wonderful, wonderful message that I love having in tonight's show. You've got two choices always, ladies and gentlemen, fear and love. And I suggest you choose love over fear every time.
In this major UFO song that John Anderson writes, he has the lyrics, "Cast off your garments of fear and replace them with love." That is basically the message. This message was last night, the experiencer message.
And definitely a message that, once again, I can stand behind 110%.
And the important thing about John Anderson, he's told this to 5 people privately that I know. He's never told the story publicly. He was with the band Yes, which sold 50 million albums, big British band. He was playing in Las Vegas, Nevada. He was at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. He was up in his room, and an alien came through the wall and gave him information. So he is directly an experiencer.
Well, that definitely adds a very good bit of intrigue to the case file, now doesn't it? The same guy that was talking about the downloads and having experiences and writing songs in 5 minutes is actually got information from an alien that came through the wall. Now, as strange and far out and wild as that sounds, I can't count the abduction cases where they said the aliens came right through the wall.
Cat Stevens is an experiencer. He became a Muslim and now will not talk about it anymore. But he had an experience in London, and he wrote 2 songs. He used to sit on the roof. This is a story. He used to sit on the roof of the complex in which he lived in London and look at the sky. The interest may have stemmed from the fact that he was abducted by aliens. He told his encounter in the 1970s. One night I was lying on my back in bed and I saw this flying saucer shoot across the sky and stop over me. It sucked me up into it. When it put me down, I shot up in bed. I knew it wasn't a dream. It didn't feel like a dream. It was real. I know it was real.
So he has what is to him perceived as a abduction experience.
And then he writes this song. It's called Freezing Steel. This is a song about his abduction.
And of course, unfortunately, we can't play the song on YouTube.
The interesting thing there is he says, I'm on the ship with freezing steel, the ship with no wheel.
And of course, many abductees, especially the scientific experiment abductees that we've heard about, have been on the cold steel tables and in a ship that doesn't have a wheel. And that actually makes a lot of sense with the other case files we went over on this show and the things we know about the technology in which they supposedly use to navigate these craft.
And when I get into the consciousness thing, I'll talk about the experiences that I've encountered. Will clearly tell you there's no wheel. You use your mind to fly the ship. That's how they're flying the ship. So, and it's neat how he said the ship with no wheel, no guiding wheel.
And if you remember in the paranormal technology episode, we spoke about Colonel Corso, who made the claim that the aliens wore a headband that they believed was used to pilot the ship using just mental technology or telekinesis, if you will. And if you wonder what something like that might look like, there are 2 toys on the market right now you can buy that have this very same type of technology. One of them is called the Mind Flex, that is by Mattel, and there's another one called the Star Wars Jedi Force Trainer. Both of these use headbands that read brainwaves to control the game. So it's not as far out as one might originally think. And a lot of these abductees describe just that, a craft that doesn't have a wheel yet is piloted somehow. And of course we do believe as researchers that it's these mind-brain headband connecting devices, technology that is used to pilot a lot of these ships, literally by the power and speed of thought.
Carlos Santana, and this is where I'm saying, and when I talk about consciousness, I'll talk about how this download thing I believe is working. I've got a model that fits, and I talk about the neurology of the model. I'll show you MRIs, the EEG scans, and how brains can link and lock up and stuff like that. And so what's happening, I believe, is not just aliens. It's higher dimensional, higher vibrational beings, entities that are doing this. So Carlos Santana doesn't talk about aliens, but he believes he's talking to an archangel by the name of Metatron.
Okay, two things here. First, Metatron is the archangel also known as Enoch, at least by some claims. Now, with that said, Carlos Santana, I really believe, is an alien. And there's two reasons. Number one, he was old when my parents were kids, and the man has not aged a day. With that said, he makes some of the most amazing music ever. He, like Hendrix, can make a guitar do things that very few others have ever done before. The man is an absolute genius on the guitar, but he does not age. And I can't help but wonder if he might be himself an alien. No wonder he's in contact with these angels, as he calls them, the other dimensional creatures, if you will.
And this is where his download stuff is coming from. And J.J. Hertak, in this field, also talks about his encounter with Metatron and ties it more into UFOs.
Now, aside from ancient aliens, I've never heard Metatron connected into UFOs. But if you take the story of Enoch and him being taken into heaven, if you know the book of Enoch, then and turn that around and look at it from an ancient astronaut theory way of looking at it. And I have always said, why did the messengers in the Bible come down? Why did every single messenger come down to give a message from God, right?
Doing his music, he sits, he meditates, he faces junior high schools.
For an album, right? Supernatural.
So if the weekend begins early, then the morning begins later. That's why you get your sketch, even though I say you'll get it every Wednesday morning ahead of the Rabbit Hole lore. We'll return you back to part 2 of Musicians and UFOs, the Dark Wolf's Den Show, for Wednesday, March 24th on the Ripon Rabbit Hole.
Why? And
hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Ash.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to Dark Wolf's Den.
The Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in the first half, we have covered another plethora of musical artists who have had contactee or abduction scenarios. And in the end of the last half, we talked about Carlos Santana and then started to touch on one of my favorite singers from the 90s, the lead singer of Matchbox 20. That is, of course, Rob Thomas. And that's where we're going to pick up right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, our speaker once again for this evening, Mr. Grant Cameron.
And Rob Thomas said, when he was interviewed about his winning the Emmy years later, he said, if I were to have a conversation about that night 13 years ago when the aliens landed on my roof and probed me, that would be more surrealistic about what happened that night, talking about winning the Grammys. So at one time he talks about, yes, he had this alien abduction experience the year before, or the year they were putting Supernatural together. He wrote the song called Jesus is an Alien. He also wrote the song called 3 a.m., where he's up in the middle of the night and he's like, walking around like he's waiting for something to happen.
So I think any of us would agree if we were standing on stage accepting an Emmy, we would consider that a very surreal experience. At least I know I would. But Rob Thomas said it's nowhere near as surreal as the UFO experience where the aliens landed on his roof and probed him. So there you go. I don't know. I mean, that would be quite surreal. I don't know about as surreal as winning an Emmy, but according to him, it's a lot more. I guess he kind of gotten used to winning awards, right? Also, 3 a.m., I can see why. It's a great song. Like, I love that song. That is one of the songs that's in the jukebox in the back of my head that plays randomly. And it likes to play that one a lot for some reason. And next up on the list, we have another artist that is a classic artist who has won many, many awards for his work.
The other one that they mentioned was Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton, you may not know, wrote this music for Communion.
Communion, once again, from the first series, is the Whitley Strieber movie.
And Eric Clapton, there's no direct UFO connection to him except for this writing of Communion. But this is Eric Clapton with a woman, and this woman's son has now come forward, and his name is Michael Lee Hill. And Michael Lee Hill, if you go on his site, he talks about the Anunnaki. He talks about his connection to the Anunnaki. He's the guy that's filming all the UFOs over the Great Lakes, and he believes he's Eric Clapton's biological son, and he's got the photo to sort of prove it. He's tried to contact Eric Clapton, and of course, Eric Clapton may have 50 kids, so he doesn't want to really acknowledge. So he hasn't been able to confirm this, but he lives in Cleveland, where Eric Clapton lives. And his mother has the photo, and this guy, if you ever get on his site, you talk about UFOs, he has the NSA has contacted him. He tells the whole story about being contacted by the government and his connection.
So Eric Clapton doesn't have any direct contact with UFOs or aliens or anything like that. However, a guy that considers himself the son of Eric Clapton, although unclaimed by Eric, still, the guy that considers himself the son of Eric Clapton is very connected to the alien question. So there is a small connection, though I think that is kind of pushing it just a little. I will give it to you guys on that one. However, our next artist might be a little harder to brush away. There was a band in the 80s that I enjoyed. It was actually formed in 73, and the lead singer had a really, really long tongue. Do you guys remember what band this is?
This is Kiss. And again, this is one of the big bands that sold whatever it was, 300 million albums or 200 million albums or whatever. Ace Frehley from Kiss. Listen to his experience. Listen to him talk.
That's right. If you said Kiss, go ahead and give yourself a point. You are absolutely right. Way to go. But it's not Gene Simmons of Kiss that had the experience. No, it was actually a guy named Ace Frehley.
I woke up one morning and found myself lying on the ground in front of the front doorway of my house. My body was half in the house and half out in the driveway. I'd woken up in a lot of strange places in my life, but this one took the cake. I slowly got up and went inside for a cup of coffee. As my head cleared, I could recall a strange dream about being inside a spaceship. It didn't seem that weird since I dreamt about UFOs and aliens from time to time in the past without ever giving it a second thought. This time, though, it seemed different, more real. Maybe because I'd never woken up in the doorway before. The more I thought about it, the more vivid it became in my mind's eye. After breakfast, I decided to go outside and look around the yard. I stumbled across a circular impression in the grass, almost like a giant burn. It appeared to be about 30 feet in diameter, but after inspecting it more closely with a tape measure, it actually turned out to be 27 feet. 27, my lucky number. Later in the shower, I checked my body for marks. I was looking for signs of being abducted. There was nothing, and he goes on. So basically, you have another major guy who talks about this.
And yet another musical artist who seems to have a plethora of UFO experiences and abduction experiences. I wonder if it influences the music he makes.
This is Sammy Hagar. Sammy Hagar is very vocal about his experience. I'll actually just play it for you here.
Sammy Hagar, that's right, lead singer of Van Halen, also known as the Red Rocker.
You got to remember, he led the biggest band of the late 70s and early 80s. He was a major player back then. This is Peter Robbins. His sister wrote music for the Blue Oyster Cult, and if you know her, Peter Robbins has told the story very many times, direct experiencer. Had drawn the stuff on the ship, the experiments with the Greys and stuff like that.
Yet another musical artist in a way connected to the UFO field. You guys remember Blue Oyster Cult? That may be a little bit before some of your time.
This is the Moody Blues. This is the best one.
And you guys remember Art Bell used to use the Moody Blues as his bumper music. And our network partner over there, Mr. AJ the Ripon Rabbit, also uses the same type of music, the Moody Blues, as his bumper music. And I can't help but wonder if there's a reason that they're used so much on paranormal radio shows, right? And when you listen to their case file, it becomes very clear and evident exactly why their music is used. They are an extremely highly influenced group as far as the alien question goes. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, the case file that I promised you on the last show when we kind of teased and touched on, but one of the golden nuggets of this whole series, the case file of the Moody Blues.
And when we come to this thing, we were talking about this thing about spirituality, consciousness, this sort of stuff. This is the one I always say. When you want an example, all you need is one example.
As the old saying goes, you only need one white crow to prove that every crow isn't black. You only need one piece of evidence to change the entire paradigm.
An abduction experience that goes back before birth, and everything changes. It is no longer a physical problem. It is a spiritual problem. The material world is gone once you take one back before birth. And I have a number of examples, but the one I always use is the Moody Blues, because the Moody Blues is a big-time band, and everybody knows who they are. The Moody Blues were clearly abducted. This is a story. There's been a number of stories written. This happened in 1967. They were coming from Manchester into London. They saw this red light. Mike Pinder's in the back seat. He's looking out the window, and he's looking at this thing, and he's watching it, and they think maybe it's a tower. And then he says, "Watch this, you guys," and they're watching it. And then they stop the car, and the thing lands off the motorway. It lands in a field, and and the next thing they remember, they're in London, and they're 3 hours late. So they don't deny, and on this thing, the one guy, I think the lead guitarist actually draws the alien, the impression of the alien that they were encountering, whatever.
That's not the only experience that the Moody Blues have had.
But the Moody Blues tell a story. And so when I do this thing about before birth and how everything changes, how the material world suddenly dissolves, they come to Colin Andrews, a good friend of mine, and the guy who gave me, when I had my download, when I suddenly shifted 180 degrees, I was listening to Colin Andrews talk. Colin Andrews was talking about consciousness. The Moody Blues come to one of Colin Andrews' lectures. The lead, Mike Pinder, and the lead guitarist were there. And Colin said, they came to me in my lecture, and they said to me, we need to talk to you. We got to tell you something. And he said, okay, fine. So they go for dinner. And Colin says they're telling the story, and he said, you can tell they're not making the story up, because it's going back and forth. This guy tells it, and this guy tells it, and they're telling this story, and tell them this, and they're telling this story. And they basically say that before they were born, they clearly remember being on some sort of ship, and they were at a table, and there was wise elder type people, and they were told, you are going to be musicians, and you are going to put lyrics into the songs. So when you hear Mike Pinder talk, and he says, I believe that material is being moved into music, he clearly says, he doesn't say where he's getting the idea from, but he says he clearly believes that stuff is being put in music.
And with stories like that, it makes you wonder where the inspiration for some of these songs is actually coming from.
But they're telling Colin, and then the lead guitarist says, tell him about how we came back in the earth. Tell him how it worked. Tell him how we went to that black hole. And so and Colin said, you could tell him. I mean, they're basically telling this story, that before they were born, this was chosen. This is the whole soul concept idea, that if this is true, if the Moody Blues are telling the truth, then it all changes. Then it's this whole thing of multiple lives, and that most of the people in this room are probably advanced spiritual beings, and we've all agreed to come here, and we've all agreed to raise consciousness, to do something, that we are all part of a team, that we're doing something. And I can give numerous examples. Chris Bledsoe in his abduction experience, and this is a guy who's a very religious guy. He was Pentecostal. He was a deacon in the Pentecostal church. He got thrown out for dealing with the devils. Has this just dramatic experience, and he was a big-time businessman. And he during his regression a year later, he's being regressed by Dr. Michael O'Connor, who's an associate of John Max, and he's going, promise, and I promise, and I promise. Where's my son? I want to go home, and I promise. And then O'Connor says, what are you talking about? What's this promise? And he said, can you talk to the aliens? And he said, yeah. He said, ask the aliens, what's this promise? And he said, they have been with me since before I was born. And the promise is that I'm going to carry the message. I have this message for the world, and I'm there to deliver it. So you have numerous examples that I can quote you, but the Moody Blues is the best example of somebody that the high-profile people who are saying, this starts before you're born. This is not a random event. And we now know this with abductions. We used to think abductions were random events. We now know you're a lifer. If you're an experiencer, you're probably a lifer. You've been taking your whole life, and your whole family's involved, and that it's a progression of something which I'm now saying from my shift has really got nothing to do with the material world. It's much, much different situation.
But it really is something that all of these musical artists have had these experiences, and all of them put in their lyrics the message, the alien message, if you will, to love each other and take care of the planet, and things like that. The alien message that all abductees come back with. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that all of these musicians are having abduction experiences? And do you think the inspiration for the messages of the music that they get actually comes from an alien source? Or do you think perhaps it's just a little bit of imagination and it's all in the heads of the musicians? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, all you can do is look at the evidence, apply a little common sense, and in the end, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right. That's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. The den may be closing tonight, ladies and gentlemen, but don't you worry. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday, March 25th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with an all-new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. That's right. Tomorrow night, we're going to finish off with part 3 of musicians and UFOs, and we're going to dig specifically into the downloads involved with this topic. It's really going to be amazing, and if you guys have enjoyed so far, you definitely do not want to miss the last episode of this series. That is tomorrow, Thursday, March 25th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Ripon, Common Sense Radio. Then on Friday, March 26th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, our buddy AJ the Ripon Rabbit returns with an all-new episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show. That's right. It's springtime and love is in the air. That's right. AJ's going to be talking about romance. That's right. Do you need some tips on romance? Or perhaps you're romantically inclined, or perhaps you're not so romantically inclined. Any way around, make sure you stop by Friday, March 26, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, while AJ the Ripon Rabbit and the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show covers the topic of romance. That's right. Then on Saturday, March 27th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, AJ comes back with another episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show. That's right. He's going to be talking about storytelling, and there's an art to storytelling, right? An art that is really, really fun once you get it down, and anybody can learn this art. And if you're interested in it, make sure you check out AJ the Ripon Rabbit and the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show on Saturday, March 27th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on the network are 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, Wednesday through Sunday. That's right, the most extended weekends in radio. That's right. Speaking of extended weekends, the weekend is rounded out on Sunday, March 28th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, where AJ talks about the Booth War. That's right. This is a important piece of American history, and a piece that I love that he brings up every year, and he does not let get lost. in the annals of time. So make sure you check out The Booth War, an incredible story, Sunday, March 28th, 2021, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio and the RiponRabbitHole.com. Also, speaking of the RiponRabbitHole.com, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you jump on over there and sign up for the Backstage Pass. That's right, it's absolutely free, only takes a couple seconds to sign up, and you will unlock all the features of the Ripon Rabbit Hole. That's right, like the 24/7 Backstage Lounge, where you're going to find me right after the show. That's right, I'm going to be over there hanging out with the rest of the rabbits, and we would love to have you come on over and hang out with us VIP backstage. That's right, how many radio shows you get to hang out with the host afterwards, right? Also, make sure you go over to the Down the Rabbit Hole, our social media alternative, and when you sign up for your Backstage Pass, you are automatically signed up for our newsletter that we send out every Wednesday morning with all the information about all the wolf dens and rabbit holes that we're going to be digging down all weekend long. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me. I will see you guys tomorrow night, and I cannot wait. And on behalf of Walt House, Chick Mandela Effect, AJ the Ripon Rabbit, everybody at Ripon Common Sense Radio, our incredible mod team over on the YouTubes, and everyone who has made this possible. My name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And remember, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, stay awake, but dare to dream. Good night, everybody. How? Yeah, that's right.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.